will be your moderator today. Now, before we get started, we have a few housekeeping notes to go over. Today's session is being recorded, and we will be sending out the recording link following the event. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please drop them into the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. You will also find some additional resources and links for our upcoming webinars under the section titled Docs on the right-hand side. And now I am excited to introduce you to our speakers for today, Shari Lava, Research Vice President of AI and Automation at IDC, and Mourad Jaakou, Amplify General Manager at Axway. I will now hand it over to Shari.
Thank you so much, Yanda. And I'm really excited to be here, really excited to be able to share some of the research that I have today. I'm going to take us on a bit of a tour of what the market has been telling us through various studies we do at IDC over the last 12 months. But in general, there are four big themes I'm going to cover today. And we're going to talk about this word automation and redefining what it means in an AI world and what it means with integration. We're going to talk a little bit about why agentic AI needs integration and sort of what that having that gives us and what that means for current AI initiatives that many companies have going, probably even yourself. I'm going to talk a little bit about integration technology renewal. We've been using integration tools for, some of us a few decades now. How is that working for us? What tools do we have? Do we have the right mix for tomorrow? And then finally, we'll end off just with some key takeaways for you to think about as we go through. So hopefully that sounds excited. As I said, I'm Shari, and my background, I have worked in all sorts of areas, research, consulting, a number of different things. Give me just one sec here. All right, so let's start off by talking about some data from our most recent survey. This is IDC's Future Enterprise Resiliency and Spending Survey. And one of the questions that we ask, and we ask this fairly consistently, is we ask, okay, here are a bunch of line items that are in a typical IT budget. Which of these are most immune to budget reduction in the next 12 months, regardless of what happens in the economic environment? And what you can see is AI and automation initiatives are at the top, followed by security, risk and compliance, and infrastructure and IT optimization initiatives. And what's kind of interesting about this is that AI and automation and security, risk, compliance, they swap back and forth and have been for the number one and number two position for probably, I would say, the last 2 years, because they go hand in hand. But the infrastructure and IT operation optimization is something that really started coming up in early 2025 as organizations started to think through how they were going to operationalize IT with having almost 50% of their workloads, and in some industries even higher, on premise. And so when we look at this, we're kind of like, okay, this makes sense. A lot of focus on AI and automation, but it leaves us with this question. We have a good sense of what AI is mostly, but what about automation? What does automation mean? One of the pieces of feedback I hear a lot is, hey, this automation word, we hear this word a lot. It's been used for years. Isn't it just sort of like a word that's meaningless because it means so many different things to different people? And what I would argue is that it's actually that because automation is about technology and is technology, part of the reason that it means different things to different people is because the definition keeps changing over time. If we go back 5 years to when we were in the heart of the pandemic, does the word automation mean the same thing today as it meant then when we were all trying to get our more digital transformation done in order to be able to continue to operate our businesses in the uncertain environment we found ourselves in? Probably not so much. What about 10 years ago when you were probably installing your second or third integration tool, whether that was API management or an iPaaS tool? Or 20 years ago when we were implementing big enterprise applications like ERPs and CRM, which are also often thought of as a form of automation. So when you think about it that way, it's actually really clear that we've deployed a lot of types of automation in our environment over the last few decades. We have process-oriented automation. We have very functional specific automation in the middle, customer service, marketing, supply chain, IT automation. And then we have integration, which is also a form, an enabler of automation, right? Application integration, API management, B2B integration. And then in late 2022, generative AI came onto the scene, and we all started working with that and figuring out ways we could further automation with that. But the challenge up to this point is that generally, while we've deployed all of these types of automation, they don't always work together all that well. They're often islands of automation. And the problem with islands of automation is that when you start deploying, thinking about an end-to-end business process, and you have these uneven starts and stops with these islands of automation, that's when your customer experience suffers. That's when customers get dropped, tickets get missed, sales get missed, employees have a bad experience, customers have a bad experience. So we need to kind of get beyond these islands of automation, even though we have even more innovation hitting us all the time, because we have all of this today. And then, we have agentic AI that comes onto the scene, and we're kind of trying to understand as an industry, how does this fit with all of the automation I already have deployed? Am I throwing things out? Am I replacing things? Is it ready for prime time? How does all of this come together? And if you're thinking, you know what, that's really where I'm struggling, I got news for you. You're not alone. In December, in this same Future Enterprise Resiliency Spending Survey, but from December of last year, we asked companies what were the top business risks that senior leadership was discussing about agentic AI. And the first thing was possible unintended consequences from their complex interactions with systems and users. Now, that is a mouthful, but if we break down what that means, complex interactions with systems and users, that is that taped and glue that you have in place to try and bridge the gap between your islands of automation that you have today. So what are you worried about? You're worried about how is agentic AI in the middle of all of that going to act? And then the second thing that came up was security vulnerabilities due to autonomous actions. Notice that we're not talking about external actors here. That's further down the list. In fact, the top two things, which I have highlighted here, are actually things that are in your organization, not outside of your organization. And therefore, they're things in your control if you take the right steps. But it means we need to think a little bit differently about the tools that we are using today to orchestrate our business processes and the data that flows between steps in those processes. So in April of this year, we asked organizations, okay, where are you on your current state of evaluating or using agentic AI? And it was kind of interesting because we found that understanding was a little bit mixed in terms of it. But when it came to, actual progress, if we look at the outside ring on this, we can see that the majority of people were in that dark blue where they're saying, we're in initial testing, proof of concept. Almost 50% of people in the organization said that were below the C-suite level. But the C-suite level instead was more likely to say, no, we've already invested significantly. We have things in production. And the problem is that's a big expectation gap. And if your C-suite doesn't understand, number one, where you really are with agentic AI, and number two, what's getting in your way, there is going to be a reckoning of that expectation gap. And so we need to be communicating upward the importance of both what we want to do with AI and what we need to enable it properly. So let's talk a little bit about what agentic AI is actually, because it seemed to follow on relatively quickly from generative AI. And so we like to kind of break it down. Generative AI is about assisting. I want to do something and I ask for assistance. Hey, build me a menu. Hey, rewrite this to make it sound more simplified. those sort of assistive things, but it's not actually taking action. It's not going and updating a record somewhere on my behalf. Agentic AI, you can almost think of as like the componentization of large language models, but to perform a specific task. Now, it's using the same large language model that a generative AI uses, but it has the power to act autonomously to limits you define. Often we refer to those as guardrails. And when we use agentic AI, right, what does that give us? It gives us it has the ability to reason with data, assuming it has the right data. It can perform actions like set a meeting request or do all of these things for me around this. I've got a new order come in. I need to do this. I need to double check it, assign this task to someone, those sorts of things. It's smaller focus scope of tasks. So it's not like a program where we have it do multiple things. It's almost in the sense like an API where it's going to perform a very finite task that has very defined limits. It needs context, and it has the authority to make decisions up to predefined limits, but it requires connectivity. Why? Why does it require connectivity? Because if you've ever heard the thing in your company, you've probably heard someone say, hey, we make data-driven decisions here in our company. Okay, that's probably true mostly, but I would argue you actually make data-informed decisions. You see the data, and if something looks off, you may decide, you know what, my experience, or potentially my bias, but my experience is telling me that this is wrong. And so I'm going to consider the data, but I'm going to take this action. Agentic AI only makes data-driven decisions. So it assumes that the data that you provided to take an action is correct. And so if it doesn't have connectivity to the latest customer status, right, which is they've called in and they're frustrated because they haven't received service, that is not the time you want your sales agent in agentic AI to be trying to upsell this customer. And if it doesn't have the ability to connect to those systems and understand the current state, that's where we get nervous with those unintended consequences we were talking about just a slide or so ago. Now, if we get agentic AI right, lots of great benefits, lots of reasons to do this. We get more flexible. It's more flexibility than deterministic coding. I can say, this is the outcome I want. Here are the approved paths to get here. Using the data, make a decision about which way is the right way to go. So this is a good thing, right? That gives us resiliency in our business processes, the ability to make sure things don't get dropped. So it can really act as that orchestrator of my business processes. It also allows for more exception processing and deflection. So right now, when we have something that follows a regular deterministic flow and we hit an exception, all exceptions end up needing somebody to handle it manually. With this, it's almost like when we invented password resets in the help desk, we have the ability to say, okay, for these sorts of things, let's just let the agent take the right path to correct, just like a human would. And if it's above a certain threshold, then we'll send it to a human in the loop to take care of. So this is good. This gives us more ability to not handle manual exceptions all the time. The other thing that agentic AI can give us is, we talked about these islands of automation, and I hinted at this already, but really we have the potential for agentic AI to be the orchestrator of our islands of automation and give us more resilient bridging between the different components that we have today, which means you can get more from your existing automation investments. But there are some you might not want to continue working with. Some may have run their course, and I think that's what we want to get into in just a minute. One more thing to just talk about here quickly about agentic AI is, okay, I mentioned that in April, there was a big expectation gap. So we looked again in our most recent survey in September to see, okay, what kind of progress are we making? And we can see that we're making some progress. The dark green is where companies have agents in production in multiple areas. The dark blue is they have agents in production in one area. And then we can see that's actually a lot further ahead and the expectation gap isn't the same. But we still do have some expectation gap between that C-suite and the other levels in the organization that are in charge of the execution and the building of agentic AI and agentic flows. And so what that tells us is that we're still having trouble scaling our agents into a production environment and getting the returns that we're looking for. And in fact, when we look at back into the September data, when we take a look, we can see that, in fact, right now, most companies are spending most of their time in AI focused on improving the results that they get from the AI projects that they have in play today. That made up over a third. We had a bunch still starting new projects. That was a little over a quarter, but really the vast majority are trying to get better results from the AI investments that they've already made. And when we look at what is getting in the way, now that we've been experimenting for some time, the top two things that come up are data quality and security and integration with existing systems. So coming back to that point I was making about agents and any AI needing context from your business data, this is the primary barrier that's organizations are trying to solve for in order to get more value out of AI. And so that means we need to make sure that the tools we're using are ready to support that because they have a huge role in enabling what we want to do with AI. But speaking of tools, and I alluded to this at the beginning, we have a lot of integration tools deployed today. This particular chart looks at every type of integration modality, API gateways, management, iPaaS, legacy messaging, B2B, like and all across this. And we can see that quite a few companies, particularly as we get into the enterprise size companies, have multiples of each tool, have multiple vendors for each tool, and procured all of these separately. So there was a time where to get all of these capabilities, these 8 modalities, you needed 8 vendors or more in order to do what you need. But that's not the case anymore. At this point, a lot of the tools have expanded out and have more of these capabilities offered in the same platform or from the same vendor. Because the problem when you have 8 separate companies in your integration architecture, and that's a minimum, is that they don't always work together well. And when that happens, your data flows suffer. And so we're going to zero in on API and integration for a minute. We can see that when we ask companies, what's the reason that you have multiple tools? You can see at the bottom, number 1 was technology requirements. For gateways, number 2 was separation of concerns. Okay, I get that. Sometimes we need to keep them separate for a very specific reason. But the technology requirements, I can tell you as someone who is familiar with a lot of different API gateway offerings, there is certainly a time when the requirements probably were dictating what gateway you needed to use, but that may not be true anymore. Now, not always, but sometimes. When it comes to API management, though, and integration software, these solutions have come a long way. And if you're evaluating the solutions that you're using today based on what they were capable of doing when you first purchased them 5-10 years ago, they've likely been updated. They likely have more capabilities, and you're likely missing out on some critical features that are not only going to set you up for success with connecting applications, but are going to be fundamental to what you want to do with AI. And the challenge is even though a lot of companies have multiple tools already in all of these, we can also see, and we'll see in just a second, that a lot of companies are planning to buy more. And the challenge we have is when we look at top priorities for AI investments in the next year, we can see that ensuring data quality and availability for AI, top, and in almost every geography. But if we go and then we know we're going to make more investments. We can see that companies are planning to double their investments in connectivity technology in the next 5 years. The question we have to ask ourselves is, what do we do with all of the existing technologies that we have? Because the challenge that we have is, it's not just IT that's looking to procure more data connectivity and middleware solutions at this point. Line of business is also planning to procure these solutions because they don't have access to the capabilities they need, and they can no longer afford to wait. There's too much going on in IT, and especially in terms of AI, to get those integration requirements met, to build the kind of digital services businesses want to build. And so line of business could go around IT and start to procure these on their own. The problem, of course, is then we have even another island of automation that we have to try and integrate into the organization, and eventually IT needs to solve for this. So what's driving this? Why does IT not have the capacity they need in order to meet what line of business wants? Well, we know that there's competition. If you look on the right-hand side, you can see that two of the top challenges preventing companies from realizing their full potential with AI investments, as well as everything else they want to do, competition for resources between AI and other IT and digital technology initiatives. So we want to be able to go fast with AI because that's what the C-suite wants. But unfortunately, that means everything else that we had planned might suffer because those things are most budget immune. And when you're looking at the fact that we know up to this point, for most companies, less than half of their AI-related projects have delivered any measurable business outcome. And I think it's only 11% that have met return on investment. This becomes a critical problem. The other thing that we see is that when we're thinking about how organizations want to leverage AI and the focus on AI, we know that they're potentially missing all of the things that enable AI. So, example, from our June Future Enterprise Resiliency Survey, we asked IT leaders what they plan to do in order to protect business profits from geopolitical issues. And in this case, tariffs came up as an example, but it could have been anything from a boat being stuck in the Suez Canal to anything. I think the answer would have been the same. We had a lot of companies, 56% say, hey, yeah, we have concerns about things that are threatening our business revenue or profits. And when we asked them, what do you plan to do about it? The number one answer was, well, we're going to accelerate investments in new solutions such as AI agents, and that's going to protect us from business uncertainty. Okay, but looking at the stats we just looked at that said they're not delivering business value, and most companies are focused on improving the results from them, and that they know they need their data, one of your jobs is going to be to communicate up into the organization that integration and all of the tools that we have, including the ones that don't work well together, is part of how you enable AI. Your connectivity is essential to getting any business value out of AI. So if you have a C-suite that's counting on AI to be the silver bullet, but they don't understand the link between integration and AI, you run the risk of your integration project ending up in bucket number 2, which is we're going to delay some projects like integration to ensure we have sufficient budget for critical spending. So it's incumbent on you to be communicating to the C-suite when a project is directly necessary in order to improve business outcomes from AI, because that's how we ensure that we continue to have that stable funding. That's how we continue to ensure that we're ready for tomorrow. And the problem is the tools that we have might not be ready for tomorrow's requirements. Integrators definitely understand the role between integration that integration and automation will play in AI enablement, because when we ask them, hey, what are the things, for those of you planning to buy a new tool, what are the things you're expecting it to play, the role you're expecting it to play in your larger AI and automation strategy? Number one answer was connecting data and process flows within business applications to AI applications. Okay, that's what integration does. That makes a lot of sense. But number two, securing access to sensitive data. Number three, management of AI components such as prompts and agents. Number four, enabling data transformation, augmenting and AI and ML pipelines. Every other thing on this list are new requirements for your integration solution. And so you need to be asking yourself, can my existing integration architecture play a role in enabling these things? Because these are the expectations that integrators have of their integration solutions going forward. And if you're using something that was last updated 5 to 10 years ago, there's a good chance it isn't ready to enable you the way you need in order to be ready to meet those expectations your C-suite has of what you should be doing with AI. So then, what should a modern integration solution do? What should you expect from it? Well, it has to have flexible deployment options. It has to have the ability to process, run, and manage in the environments that you need them to, with the level of management you want. What does that mean? We know from the research that you have data in the cloud, you have data in private cloud, you have data in public cloud, and then you still have a lot of data on premise. And each one of those solutions you have today is probably better at one or the other, especially those legacy solutions, but you need a holistic approach that works across all of those. You will be in a hybrid strategy for quite a long time. We know that's not going to change. And so your integration solution needs to be able to connect to your applications where they are, to your AI where it is, and where your agents are running. Number two, they need to be compatible with other connectivity and automation modalities. The need for organizations to be able to understand the way the data is flowing through their organization is increasing, not decreasing. And so data that originates from a business partner, comes into the organization, needs to be propagated into the downstream systems, manipulated, and then potentially sent back out to either the same or a different business partner. That needs to become more seamless. So B2B integration, application integration, messaging, APIs, your gateways, they all need to work together. No more of this, well, these two don't work well together, and there's all this custom code we have to make it work, which then isn't scalable. We need scale like we've never needed before. And the more we use agentic AI, the more we are going to be relying on the integration architecture, because the more that we're having our humans do less swivel chairing, which is good for them, nobody likes that, the more scalability we need in our integration architecture. And some of the tools we're using today, we're just not built for that. Number three, you should expect more intelligence and error handling from your integration architecture. The solutions that are not using AI inside the tool to make them easier, to be your extra set of eyes, are not enough anymore. These solutions have the capability now to help recover from errors, simple errors like a timeout or something like that. They have the ability, we've had the capability for a while for gateways to do, throttling and those sorts of things. But these things now can be done at an even better scale and with more intelligence behind them. Your solution should be your extra set of eyes while you're trying to manage and operate the environment that's at runtime, not to mention the intelligence and error handling we expect in development time. So those things should all be part of your stack, because those will make you able to do more faster. And fourth, more compliance and security support. Modern middleware has built-in security and compliance features and should be able to provide very proactive intelligence on threats, whether that's when you're bringing an API management that's been an API that's been unmanaged into management, or whether that is notifying you proactively that something that you're developing is not going to meet compliance standards. These are all things that you should be expecting from tools going forward that were not requirements of your tools just a few short years ago. They seemed like wizardry at the time, but they're possible today and you should expect them. So a couple thoughts I want to leave you with. I think first, your integration architecture that you have today might work, but is it adding incremental value today? Right? Is it just working mostly, or is it actually high functioning? And will it add value tomorrow as you deploy, just like all the other organizations we see, as you deploy more agents and more generative AI and you're trying to provide more context, can your integration architecture that you have today provide the context that AI needs in order to provide more business value? So I think the second part then is you need to assess your automation technologies carefully. There are likely some tools, especially as we think through that first one, that you really should be moving out, sunsetting out of the environment. The islands of automation and the legacy technology in your organization are very likely to become an inhibitor to your AI strategy. It certainly has been for other organizations, as we saw clearly in the data, and it will be for you too. So it's time to really start cleaning some of that up and explaining to the C-suite that this is how you get more business value with AI. And then third, AI is having a pretty big impact on technology priorities in your company. It certainly in 2025, we saw that it got more funding than most organizations planned on. We see that it's fairly immune to budget reductions in 2026 for most companies. That's great, but we need to, there's a reason that bucket is AI and automation. We need to be able to explain that those projects will not drive the business value that's expected without holistic and interoperable integration architecture and tools. And so with that, I'm going to say thank you for your time, and I'm going to pass it over to Mourad.
Thank you, Shari. Thank you for this great presentation. A lot of insight, very important learnings. So you mentioned a couple of business risks. And you mentioned that the biggest one is the unexpected consequences in a complex organization, which is basically refers to the governance. And the second one is the security part. So at Axway, these are the two main drivers for our vision and the roadmap. So let me give you a quick update about who is Axway and who we are. So Axway is a global software company. We are more than 5,000 employees supporting our customers. We do have local presence in 26 countries, providing support in local language with the local culture. Last year, we achieved a bit more than $750 million revenue. And we do support large banks, large credit card organizations, manufacturers, and healthcare companies in their integration business. So, as I said, we do have solutions, integration solutions to support large organizations across the globe in the bank, insurance, healthcare, energy, government, manufacturing. And we do rely on a very large partner ecosystem to support, in addition of our experts, to support our customers in their integration projects. So yes, as you mentioned, Shari, so governance and security are the biggest challenges today from the business standpoint. This is exactly how at Axway we designed our modern integration and multi-pattern integration platform. Is basically we focus on the governance, security, and the ability to manage any type of interaction. So this solution is based on a unified control plane, which basically brings the capability to design all flow automation and provide the visibility and the monitoring across all these flows and integrations. It's a control plane that is designed for different personas. It can be used by developers. It can be used by IT specialists, IT integrator, business owners, and citizen integrators as well. It comes with a pre-built capabilities that will help to streamline and speed up the integration and automation projects. You mentioned that one of the biggest need is to have this integration engine running everywhere. It can be in private cloud, public cloud, or public SaaS or on-premise. This is exactly how we did design our integration platform. It can be deployed on-premise, private SaaS, or public SaaS as well. Based on the data constraint, if it's a sensitive data, you can have the data plane or the engine installed and running on-premise to handle these sensitive data. And if you want to automate interaction between different SaaS applications, you can obviously use our SaaS engine to handle these kind of SaaS to SaaS integrations. Definitely, it's an integration platform, and you mentioned that as well, that manage different patterns. It can be APIs, it can be files, messages, events, agents, MCPs, etc. It's definitely a modern and multi-pattern platform. It handles as well automation based on real-time, batch, event, sync, and async patterns as well. It brings out-of-the-box connectors and pre-built assets, as I mentioned, to connect to business applications, to connect to AI applications, to technical applications, etc. And from the AI readiness, I would say, and it was very important in your presentation, it's a new challenge and a new requirement from the integration standpoint, and this is exactly what we did implement in this modern platform. It's basically all the integration that are basically connected to this AI adoption. You mentioned the prompt guarding. You mentioned the ability to secure and expose agent and MCPs. We do as well bring the capabilities to keep control on the AI costs. I mean, with the token management, data processing to comply, capabilities to comply with the local regulations, etc. All that is pre-built and ready actually in the solution. So from the business benefit, I would say, based on this modern and multi-pattern integration platform, we help our customers to accelerate their time to value. As I mentioned, we have pre-built assets that will streamline the integration project and shorten this project. Obviously, we'll lower the cost in terms of operation as we have one single solution that can be deployed everywhere. We just need to have you just need to have one single knowledge, and obviously leveraging the reusable assets and pre-built assets helps to lower the cost of maintenance and the cost of errors as well. With these modern capabilities, you have the possibility to create a partner ecosystem and to build a new product with new value that you can cross-sell to your existing customers, leveraging your partner ecosystem values as well. You can combine your existing services with partner services to create a new product that you can cross-sell to your customer. You can innovate easily based on this multi-pattern integration platform. And as I mentioned in the intro, security and governance, they are part of our DNA. So we bring this unified control plane to handle any type of integration. So you have one single place where you can see and track and monitor all your activities. Obviously, we bring a catalog of this integration, whatever the pattern. It can be APIs, it can be MCPs, agents, etc. So you have full visibility on all the pattern that exists, all the MCPs that exist, all the APIs, all the agents that exist in your ecosystem. And that will bring basically governance in terms of partner or consumer onboarding. So you bring these self onboarding capabilities to maximize the adoption of your assets, modern assets, legacy assets, with the control and the governance to always comply with your own regulation and standards, or the compliance with the authorities and the local regulations in the banking, in the insurance, retail, telco, etc. So that's basically our DNA. Security and governance is definitely part of our DNA. So this is a high-level introduction to this modern platform. If you want to learn a bit more, so Janda will share with you some next episode and what is coming in the next and the short future.
Thank you so much, Mourad. Yes, so as Mourad mentioned, our Fusion webinar series is just getting started. So please tune in for episode 2, which will happen on November 27th at 10:30 a.m. Central European Time, with a second session on December 4th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Then we have episode 3, which follows on February 3rd at 11 a.m. Central European Time, and then our second session at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So please find these links. You can find them on the doc section on the right-hand side of your screen. So take a look at those and get registered. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Any questions that came in, we will follow up with you directly. A big thank you again to Shari and Mourad for the great session, and of course to all of you for joining us. Thanks again, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.